Hey guys, what's up? It is James, and welcome to my tier list, my personal tier list for Legendary PvP on Wizard101. This tier list is a Legendary tier list, so it will only apply to schools that are levels 60 through 69. With that being said, I need to make two quick announcements before the video actually starts and we get into it. One of which being that my Wizard101 Twitter is back up and running, so if you guys want to head down in the description and click the link and it will take you straight to my Twitter. I will post things on there such as polls and just trying to get you guys' opinions on certain topics, so if you want to, feel free to go ahead down in the description. My Twitter link will be right there. Now on to the second announcement. I put a lot of thinking into this video. I just want to let you guys know because I know that there are certain situations where one school can surpass another or triumph over another school, and I just want to let you guys know that I have taken those situations into consideration. So fear not, I have given leeway to most schools and I have given thought to all schools and all situations. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get straight into the tier list, or my personal tier list, and just take into consideration, guys, that this is just my opinion. What I say is not fact. I'm not trying to push it to be fact. It's just, you know, my opinion, so just try to respect it as such. Alright, so let me explain myself here. Myth is a really good class, don't get me wrong, especially at Legendary. They have a lot of things going for them, such as Bladed Minotaur, Bladed Orthrus, stuns, you know, Medusa, they have Bassi, they have a lot of good things going for them. But in my opinion, they just can't keep up with the health and damage such as other classes have. For instance, Myth is one of the only classes in the game that gets the least amount of health, like right next to Death. And Death has gotten a major health boost within like their gear and stuff, even like at max. Myth has pretty low health compared to all the other schools. And it doesn't really make any sense because Myth is actually a good class at all levels. Like at level 30, they slay. I don't know, something about Myth, like when it comes to Legendary, they're really easily beaten by the other schools. They don't have a lot of health, especially at a low level, because the gear doesn't really help them much. Their damage is alright. Myth can get some pretty high resist, which is what I've seen most Myths do. But generally, in my opinion, even when I had a really good Myth, I had to rely on critical to win most of my matches. And now that critical is pretty much broken, that would happen more than ever. But relying on base scale without much critical here and there, I would put Myth at number 1. Alright, hold on. I know you guys are kind of mad because I put both Myth and Death below Storm, but let me just explain myself. Death is a class that has the lowest health right next to Myth, and with that being said, Death has kind of a hard time healing, which is what they tend to do a lot, especially when they're second or versing a higher tier class, such as Ice, Balance, a full resist life, or anything like that, or any school that likes to blade stack, or any school that someone in particular has really high damage in. And I think balancing Doom and Gloom to trap your enemies, wearing a life mastery to Satyr, and trying to blade stack and at the same time use sacrifice kind of gets in the way of Death strategy. Also, furthermore, Death is a class that likes to blade up and then hit, and a lot of their damage comes from over time. Being at a high rank, you're going to verse people with a lot of resist, either a lot of resist or they're going to have really good prediction skills, and most of the time they're going to have triage in their TC side. So it's kind of hard to outplay predictions, heal with what you have, because a lot of Deaths, I've been seeing at least, run life mastery and may use Satyr, while at the same time trying to balance Doom and all the stuff that I said before with sacrifice and blade stacking, and it's just really confusing. So a really good Death could utilize his strategy well with blade stacking and then executing maybe a heal afterwards if they have enough pips. But in my personal opinion, I think Death has to play the strategy game a little bit more intensely than other classes do, which is the reason why I'm putting them in number 2. And this will bring us to Storm. Now, I feel like Storm, out of all classes so far that I've mentioned, I will have to explain the most. So let me just start by asking you the question, how many times have you beat a Storm? Okay. How many times have you lost to a Storm due to a lucky bolt? If you answered not as many times as you've killed a Storm, you have not faced that many storms. There are so many times where a storm will bolt you and it will do max. It might even crit on you, oftentimes within the first round of the match, and you'll die. I can't really explain it, but Storm doesn't have a real strat. All it is really is just them bolting and RNG, but the thing is, that does not make Storm a bad class. It actually makes it a good class, because Storm can get really high resist and still have a decent amount of damage while playing with Bolt RNG, Stormlord, and a lot of other spells that can still get them somewhere even though they have low health. So in turn, they might not have a lot of health, but they still have a really high damage output, a really high critical output, and that in this age is really going to help them, especially at Legendary, which is what this tier list is on. Also, as a little side note, Storm, Legendary 2v2 with pretty much any other class goes really good together. Storm can dominate in Legendary 2v2. Alright guys, here we go, moving out of the low health zone and we're moving into the hot-headed zone, if you guys know what I mean. I like to refer to Fire as a buff Storm in the sense that they have more health than a Storm but less health than, I would say, a Life. And mainly Fire gets their time to shine from really putting a lot of pressure on the enemy, forcing them to heal a lot and getting off infections with Link. They do have their fair share of fizzles, I will admit that. Fire seems to fizzle through mantles more than Storm does. I'm not really sure if that's been evident with any of you guys, but for me, I don't know. I've seen more Storms power through mantles, well, Legendary Storms at least, since I'm talking about the Legendary tier list. But I've seen more of them power through mantles than Legendary Fires. I don't know if that's become evident to you guys, but to me, I've seen it quite a few times. Fire has great pressure. They have extremely high damage and extremely high critical. Not as much critical as Storm, but they have their fair share of high crit. Also has a great deal of overtime attacks, such as Burning Rampage, which is accessible to people who are willing to put in the work as a Legendary Fire, and they also have Heckhound. They can also implement some Fire Elf here and there, maybe for clutch moments or getting off multiple towers, but Fires do have to keep in mind that being the quote-unquote buff Storm that they are, they still don't have tons of health. As I said before, they still have low health, more than a Death and a Myth, but less than a Life. And going up against classes at high ranks, mostly classes like Life, Ice, Balance, you're not going to want to waste all your pips on one attack just because you think you're going to win or you're going to crit it. So Fire is a very strategic class. They do have their easy wins sometimes. They do have their easy losses, hard wins, hard losses, but overall, Fire is kind of in the middle, I want to say. They are a buff Storm, but they still have to play carefully. Alright, and that brings us to Life, one of my personal favorite classes to play at Legendary, sometimes at max, but not really. So, Legendary Life, I think I'll start off by pointing out some of the prominent disadvantages, since Life has a lot of disadvantages all curled up into one category, so I'll go ahead and explain them. But basically, Life in real life and in the game are very fragile. Life has the potential to be something great. In the game, it has the potential to do massive damage. The problem is when you bump a Life in the wrong direction or earthquake it or put it under doom, it's kind of hard for a Life, the opponent or you, if you're playing Legendary Life, to return from that, because not a lot of Lives can reblade in the matter of time that it would take them to keep the opponent off them in order for them to do that, or keep spamming heals and at the same time keep up tower shields not to lose the health that they just regained. So Lives, in a sense, is very fragile. It can blade up and be something powerful, but at the same time, if you get thrown off in the wrong direction, it can be really hard to recover, and that is a big flaw, and I think the only flaw of playing Life. Now, some of the advantages that Life has the potential of having really substantial damage, so that's really good, because Life normally isn't a class that is seen as a hitting class, but at Legendary it is really prominent for hitting. They have Luminous Weaver, which is very comparable in damage to Lore Master. The only difference from Weaver and Lore Master is that Weaver does not put a mantle to complement the weakness that it gives. And Weaver's weakness is, I believe, a 25% weakness, but Weaver is still really, really good for life. And if you don't want to blade up and deal damage, you can just spam that. Most of the time it works, but a lot of lives like to either throw on a Myth Mastery and introduce some Medusa into the strat or something like that. So they're very prominent with masteries as well. So I'll go ahead and hit that up on the board. And then lives can switch up their strategy a little bit. So if they don't want to run the risk of being earthquaked or put under doom, they can just throw in a little bit of heals along with some Weaver spam and be okay. Life has a shit ton of resist. Even if you don't have a pet that has resist, you can still come out with about 20 to 30 resist just by rocking Waterworks gear and stuff, and I don't know, throwing a Heartsteel and you're at like 30 base resist. Like, that's some pretty good resist for a life that doesn't have a pet. Life has, I think, the best accuracy in game, so that's really, really good. They have that going for them, and they rarely ever fizzle, even through like super mantles. And playing a life or versing a life in a match, doesn't really matter what the circumstance is, you better be expecting them to last pretty long, because life, especially at legendary, has a long life expectancy. And I know that's kind of weird to say because I'm talking about the school of life, but lives tend to drag on matches due to heals, possible criticals on heals, because not a lot of other schools that are rocking life mastery have critical to life, and lives in particular do. Depending on the gear that they're rocking, if it's Waterworks or House of Scales, they will most likely have critical to their class. And if they critical on a Satyr and you don't have a debuff on them or Doom and Gloom up, you're probably shit out of luck. Alright, you guys ready? We're gonna go ahead and throw up the page, and we're gonna start filling this thing out mad quick. So you can train stun blocks for 0 training points. You have hella good overtimes, hella good potential damage, hella good potential resist. You can steal someone's shield for 2 pips. You can stun somebody. You have stun naturally trained. Your minion is godlike. Your accuracy is not bad at all. Like, ices rarely fizzle. With Staff of the Flash, you're not gonna fizzle. They have a 2-pip bubble that you can spam, so Bubble War is imminent. You should never Bubble War with an ice. You should always play them backwards. So start putting up your debuffs first and then start hitting them so that they have to play backwards, and that screws ice up. And that right there is pretty much the only disadvantage. If ice gets played backwards, they lose. Ice is the most, if not the most, then the second most prominent class in every type of PvP. Like, no matter what tier list you make for whatever level, ice either has to be 1 or 2. It is just a very, very, very favored class, and for very, very, very obvious reasons. And that's pretty much it. Ice is a very favored class, and for very obvious reasons. As you guys can see, I filled that page out nothing flat. You know, it's one of the best classes. You have a move that hits and stuns that only costs 5 pips, and with a bubble up and infoul, I mean, with what, 60, 70, 80 damage if you have a good pet and pretty good stats, possible critical, even if not a critical, it's still doing like over 1.3 damage with, you know, a Winter Moon. It's, you know, you have moves that hit and stun, so you're kind of like Myth, you're kind of like Ice. You rock a life mastery, so throw that up on the board as well. We're just gonna cram all the stuff in here. You can crit, and most Ices do crit on their Satyr, so you can crit to life because you use Satyr a lot. Because the Staff of the Flashing Blades gives crit to every school, but Ice is the one class that uses Satyr like the most, like besides life, and it's honestly just ridiculous. Ice is a very, very, very good class, so props to KI for making a very OP but balanced class, because number 1 can still beat it from second. Balance is if not the most prominent class, then one of them, especially when it comes to legendary PvP, because we have lore spells such as Lore Master, which does a shit ton of damage and puts a lore mantle and a lore weakness on. And I think this weakness is 20 and the mantle is 35. We have Savage Paw, which I like to use for taking out towers, which does more than Lore Master, but it also costs 1 more pip, so that's 5 pips for Savage Paw. And it hits for 500 base damage and gives you a balance blade back. So there's that. We have mana burn. We have a necklace that gives us mana burn that we can utilize, and we have our House of Scales robe, which gives mana burn. So 2 completely OP cards, especially if pulled at the right times, which I've made a couple of plays with them in my videos. Some of you may have seen those, but overall a pretty OP card. We have Judgment, which can be used in clutch moments when the opponent does not have a tower shield on, and we have max pips or a substantial amount of pips that we can enchant it and use it, maybe crit on it, but it does massive damage, especially when you have a high damage output as a balance. Balances tend to have pretty balanced resist. I, for one, tend to sacrifice some of my resist for more damage, which works in my playing style. So I mean, that kind of works out for me, but most balances have maybe about 40 to 45 resist, so not as much resist as ice can get. Some balances may go above and beyond. Same with ices, same with all other schools, but mainly ices and balances, since they are like the 2 most prominent schools in legendary PvP. We also have mantle trained, weakness trained. We have a minion that can use elemental shields and weaknesses and mantles on its own. And to top it all off, if you really want to go above and beyond as a balance, you can actually get, if not as much, more health than an ice. And I don't really have gear that boosts my health a hell of a lot, and I have 4k health. And most, or some ices that I've seen were running Glendemmings and had like barely 3k health. So if I have 1k more health than you, even from second, I can still bring it back with Lore, Savage Paw, and Mana Burn alone with Infallible, and I have 10 base Pierce. But enough about me, more about the school. Balance is just an overall balanced class. It's in the name. Balance has all the cards that it needs to outplay the other school with the right mindset. If you have the right mindset while playing Balance in legendary PvP, you can potentially run any setup you want, any amount of damage you want. Well, I mean, have a substantial amount of damage and a substantial amount of resist as well as other stats, but you can pretty much have worse stats than the person you're facing, first or second, and still win, as long as they're within your skill range, within your level range. So that is the one thing that I like the most about Balance. It has a lot of strategies that I'm not going to mention in this video, and I haven't mentioned a majority of the strategies with the other classes in this video, just because it would make this video go on for hours and hours. But I just wanted to give you guys my opinion on this list. So in my opinion, Balance is number 1. Yes, it has some OP cards. It can also be outplayed, but is very, very, very hard to outplay a good Balance. Alright guys, that is all the time I have for this tier list video. If you guys want to see more tier list videos, or you want to see a tier list video on another area of PvP, such as Magus PvP, Grandmaster, or etc., let me know in the comment section below and drop a like on this video. Always appreciated for the support. And like I said before in the beginning of the video, my Twitter is back up and running, so if you guys want to go and follow me if you have a Twitter and want to stay updated with what I'm doing and my tweets, the link will be down in the description. And I hope you guys enjoyed again, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.